The granite countertop felt cold against my palms as I stared at the divorce papers Nola had just slid across our kitchen island. 23 years of marriage reduced to legal jargon and property divisions, all typed up in that sterile font lawyers love so much. "Sign and disappear, Holden Ravell," she said, her voice carrying that prosecutorial tone she'd perfected over the years. The same voice that had once whispered sweet promises now delivered ultimatums like courtroom verdicts. I looked up at my wife, soon-to-be ex-wife, standing there in her tailored charcoal suit, fresh from another late night at the law firm. Her auburn hair was pulled back in that severe bun she favored for intimidation tactics. Even at home, Nola Varrow dressed for battle. "Just like that?" I asked, picking up the papers. The weight surprised me. 47 pages of our life together, dissected and catalogued like evidence in a criminal case. "Just like that," she confirmed, checking her Rolex. "I have a conference call with the Singapore office in 20 minutes. My attorney says if you sign tonight, we can have this wrapped up in 60 days. Clean break, minimal drama, clean break. As if 23 years could be sanitized with the right legal language. As if I hadn't noticed the late nights, the mysterious business trips, the way she'd started parking her BMW in the garage instead of the driveway, making room for someone else's vehicle in our circular drive. "You seem pretty confident I'll just roll over," I said, flipping through the pages. Standard stuff mostly. She kept the house, of course. I got the cabin up north and my vintage Mustang. Joint accounts split down the middle, except for her separate consulting account that had mysteriously appeared 6 months ago. Nola's phone buzzed. She glanced at it, and I caught the faintest smile tugging at her lips. The same expression she used to get when I'd surprise her with flowers or plan weekend getaways. Now that smile belonged to someone else. "Holden, we both know this marriage has been over for years. You've got your little software company, I have my career. We're just going through the motions at this point." She moved to the coffee maker, her heels clicking against the hardwood floors I'd installed myself 3 summers ago. "Sign the papers. Make it easy for both of us." I set the documents down and really looked at her. 45 years old and still stunning, though the warmth had drained from her green eyes sometime around year 18. Success looked good on her. The designer clothes, the confident posture, the way she commanded every room she entered. All of it paid for by my steady income while she built her legal empire. "Who is he?" I asked quietly. Her hand froze halfway to the coffee pot. "Excuse me?" "The guy who's been parking in our driveway when I'm at the office. The reason you've been working late every Friday for the past 4 months. The person texting you at 10:30 on a Tuesday night about contract revisions." Nola turned around slowly, her courtroom mask sliding into place. "I don't know what you're implying, but—" "I'm not implying anything. I'm asking directly. Who is he?" For a moment, something flickered across her face. Guilt? Regret? Then it vanished, replaced by that cold professionalism she wielded like armor. "Does it matter? We're done, Holden. Have been for years. At least I'm being honest about it now instead of pretending we still have something worth saving." The words hit harder than I expected. Not because they were cruel, but because they carried a grain of truth. We had been going through the motions, hadn't we? Separate bedrooms for the past year, conversations limited to household logistics and our son's college updates. But there's a difference between growing apart and being pushed out by someone else. "So that's it? 23 years, and you want me to just sign away and disappear?" "I want us both to move on with dignity," she said, checking her phone again. "The longer we drag this out, the messier it gets for everyone, including Jamie and Sid, our sons. 22 and 24, both launched into their own lives but still protective of family stability. They'd been asking questions lately, subtle inquiries about why Mom was traveling so much, why Dad seemed distracted during Sunday dinners. I picked up the pen she'd placed beside the papers, a Mont Blanc fountain pen I'd given her for her bar exam results. The irony wasn't lost on me. You know what, Nola? You're right. Clean breaks are better. Relief washed over her face as I uncapped the pen. She actually smiled, genuine warmth breaking through her professional facade for the first time in months. I signed every page that required my signature. Holden James Ravell, written in the careful script my fourth-grade teacher had drilled into me. The pen moved smoothly, muscle memory taking over as my name repeated itself again and again across thick, expensive paper. Each signature felt oddly weightless, as if the years behind it had already been set down somewhere else. Property division blurred past. Custody arrangements that acknowledged what was already true, that our sons were grown men now, legally independent, even if emotionally tethered. Spousal support waivers, clauses and subsections. I didn't slow down. The ritual mattered more than the language. "Thank you," Nola said softly. "I know this isn't easy, but it's for the best. You'll see." Her voice carried that familiar tone she used in courtrooms and conference rooms alike. Gentle certainty, the assumption that clarity would eventually arrive and prove her right. I capped the pen and set it down beside the completed papers. Then I reached into my laptop bag and withdrew my own manila folder. It made a dull sound when it hit the granite, heavier than it looked, swollen with months of preparation. "Since we're doing clean breaks," I said, sliding my documents across the granite, "you'll want to look at these." Nola frowned, picking up the papers. I watched her face change as she read the header. Petition for Marital Education Reimbursement under State Statute 47B. The practiced neutrality slipped first, replaced by confusion, then calculation. Her eyes moved faster now, scanning instead of reading. "What is this?" "Your freedom just got expensive." She flipped through the pages, her frown deepening with each section. "Holden, what are you—" "Law school tuition for 3 years at Northwestern, bar prep courses with Kaplan, LSAT coaching with that private firm in Chicago. Then there's your executive MBA program you completed last spring." I leaned back against the counter, crossing my arms. "Funny thing about that MBA program, you told me it cost $15,000 for the whole year. Turns out the actual price tag was $53,000. I have the receipts." I could still picture the conversations, her casual tone, the half-truths delivered like afterthoughts, my own willingness to believe them because belief was easier than suspicion. The color drained from her face. "You can't be serious." "Completely serious. Section 47B of the State Domestic Relations Code allows for reimbursement of educational expenses in divorce proceedings when one spouse directly funded the other's professional advancement." I smiled, feeling something cold and satisfied settle in my chest. "Remember when you used to quiz me on family law during your first year? I picked up a few things. I hadn't meant to learn them this well, but repetition has a way of teaching." Nola was scanning the documents now, her attorney instincts kicking in. "This is ridiculous. You can't just—" "Actually, I can. See, I didn't just write software for 8 years before starting my company. I clerked for Judge Drake Torrin in family court, learned quite a bit about marital asset recovery and educational investment recoupment." I watched recognition flicker across her face, followed by something closer to alarm. She looked up at me, and for the first time in years, I had her complete attention. No phone, no multitasking, no mental sidebar planning her next move. Just focus. "The total comes to exactly $200,000. That's 3 years of Northwestern law at $47,000 per year, plus living expenses I covered while you studied. Bar prep, LSAT coaching, and that MBA program you lied about, all documented with bank transfers, credit card statements, and loan records." I recited the numbers the way she used to recite case facts, precise, unarguable, stripped of emotion. "Holden, this is insane. You supported my education because we were married. That's what spouses do." "Exactly. And when marriages end, the supporting spouse has legal recourse to recover those investments. especially when the benefiting spouse uses those credentials to build a career that directly contributed to the marriage's dissolution. The words tasted clinical, deliberate, not angry, not cruel, just finished. I could see her legal mind working, trying to find loopholes or precedents, but I'd done my homework. 3 months of research, consultations with 2 different attorneys, and a deep dive into case law had prepared me for this moment. Every likely argument already had an answer waiting for it. "You'll want to call your lawyer," I said, gathering up her signed divorce papers. "Because my petition gets filed first thing tomorrow morning, along with a motion for asset preservation pending resolution." Nola's phone was buzzing again. She ignored it this time, staring at me like she'd never seen me before. "Who are you right now?" "I'm the guy who just signed your divorce papers without a fight. I'm also the guy who spent $200,000 on your education and career development." I headed toward the kitchen door, then paused. "Oh, and Nola? You might want to be careful about that consulting income. My attorney is very interested in how a senior partner at your firm ended up paying your apartment security deposit. Something about ethical violations and conflicts of interest." The look of shock on her face was worth every penny I was about to spend on legal fees. My home office had always been my sanctuary, but tonight it felt like a war room. Bankers' boxes lined the walls, each one labeled with meticulous care. Law school documentation, MBA program records, joint account transfers, and my personal favorite, Nola's consulting arrangements. I'd been preparing for this conversation for 3 months, ever since I'd accidentally discovered the truth about my wife's new career trajectory. It started with a simple question about our taxes and spiraled into the kind of investigation that would make a forensic accountant proud. The irony wasn't lost on me. Nola thought she was married to a simple software engineer who'd stumbled into entrepreneurship. She'd forgotten about my previous career entirely. 5 years as a family court clerk, learning the system from the inside out before I switched to technology for better pay and regular hours. Judge Torrin used to say that family court was where you learned human nature at its worst and legal strategy at its finest. Divorcing couples would try every trick in the book to hide assets, manipulate custody arrangements, and rewrite history to favor their position. I'd seen it all, filed it all, and learned from attorneys who treated the courtroom like a chess match. My phone rang, interrupting my review of the educational expense calculations. The caller ID showed Bob's Place, my old friend's bar down on River Street. "Holden, you crazy son of a gun!" Bob's gravelly voice came through the speaker. "Just saw Nola tear out of your driveway like her tail was on fire. Everything okay?" Bob Henley had been my best friend since high school, back when we both thought we'd make careers out of boxing instead of settling into middle-aged respectability. He owned the Rusty Anchor, a dive bar that served as the unofficial headquarters for guys like us, men who'd traded their dreams for steady paychecks and family obligations. "Divorce papers got signed tonight," I said, leaning back in my desk chair. "Damn, buddy. I'm sorry. You need a drink?" "I've got a bottle of the good stuff behind the bar." "Actually, I need a clear head. Tomorrow's going to be interesting." I could hear the concern in Bob's voice. "What do you mean?" "Remember how I used to complain about putting Nola through law school? All those years of ramen noodles and secondhand clothes while she studied? Yeah, you were broke as a joke. I remember loaning you money for groceries more than once. Well, it turns out there's a legal remedy for that. I'm filing for educational reimbursement tomorrow morning." Silence on the other end of the line. Then Bob started laughing, a deep, appreciative chuckle that told me he understood exactly what I was doing. "How much are we talking about?" $200,000, give or take." "Holy hell, Holden. You're really going nuclear, aren't you?" "She wanted a clean break. I'm just making sure it's equitable." After I hung up with Bob, I returned to my documentation. The beauty of being a former court clerk was understanding how evidence worked in family law. Every expense had to be documented, every claim supported with paper trails that could withstand scrutiny. The law school tuition was straightforward, 3 years at Northwestern, paid directly from our joint checking account. I had the bank statements, the tuition invoices, even the parking receipts from my visits to campus during her finals weeks. The MBA program was trickier. Nola had handled the enrollment herself, telling me it was a $15,000 executive program through the local university. I dutifully transferred the money and thought nothing of it until I started digging deeper. Turns out, she'd enrolled in a prestigious program at Washington University in St. Louis, a $53,000 commitment that required weekend residencies and international study components. She'd been funding the difference through her new consulting account, the same account that had raised red flags during my informal asset investigation. That's when I discovered the connection to Brent Marrow. Brent was a senior partner at Kellerman, Dobbs and Associates, the law firm where Nola had built her career. Married, father of 3, and apparently generous with security deposits for attractive junior partners who needed downtown apartments. The ethical implications were staggering. A senior partner financially supporting a subordinate's living arrangements while both were married to other people? The State Bar Association would have a field day with that information. My laptop chimed with an incoming email. The sender was nvarrowokdalaw.com, Nola's work account. Holden, we need to talk. This reimbursement thing is ridiculous and you know it. Call me when you get this. We can work something out without involving lawyers. I deleted the email without responding. The time for private negotiations had ended the moment she slid those divorce papers across our kitchen counter. My phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. Dad? Mom called crying. What's going on? Jamie, our younger son. 22 years old and finishing his master's degree in engineering, just like his old man. I'd been dreading this part, explaining to Jamie and his older brother Sid why their parents' marriage was imploding in such a public way. I typed back, "Divorce is complicated, son. Your mother and I are working through the details. Don't worry about it. She said you're trying to take her money. That doesn't sound like you." The accusation stung, even filtered through Jamie's diplomatic phrasing. In his eyes, I was the stable parent, the one who showed up to every baseball game, helped with homework, and provided steady emotional support while Nola built her career. "I'm not taking anything that doesn't belong to me. We'll talk this weekend." I set the phone aside and returned to my files. Tomorrow morning, I'd walk into the courthouse where I used to work and file the most comprehensive marital education reimbursement petition in county history. Judge Torrin had retired 2 years ago, but his replacement, Judge Patricia Hennessy, had a reputation for thorough case review and equitable rulings. The petition itself was a work of art. 47 pages of documentation, legal precedent, and financial analysis. I'd cited 14 successful reimbursement cases from the past 5 years, including 2 that had awarded full tuition recovery plus interest and legal fees. But the real masterpiece was the asset preservation motion. If granted, it would freeze Nola's consulting account and require full disclosure of her financial arrangements with Brent Marrow. The ethical investigation would follow naturally, triggered by the court's discovery requirements. I pulled out a calculator and ran the numbers one more time. $200,000 in educational expenses plus 3 years of compound interest at the state-mandated rate of 6% annually. Legal fees would add another $15,000, assuming Nola's attorney put up a fight. The total came to roughly $247,000, a figure that would require monthly payments of over $4,000 for 5 years, assuming the court granted my request for immediate reimbursement. Nola's current salary as a senior associate was impressive, but not enough to cover that kind of obligation while maintaining her new lifestyle. The downtown apartment, the lease on her BMW, the designer clothes that had become her uniform, all of it would have to be reconsidered. My computer chimed again. Another email from Nola, this one sent from her personal account. "Holden, please don't do this. We can work out a fair settlement without dragging our business through the courts. Think about Jamie and Sid. Think about what this will do to our family's reputation." I stared at the message for a long moment, remembering the woman I'd married 23 years ago, the ambitious law student who'd promised we'd build something great together, who'd sworn that her success would benefit our entire family. Then I remembered the smile on her face when she'd checked her phone during our kitchen conversation. The same smile she used to reserve for me, now directed at someone else's messages. I deleted the email and returned to my preparation. Tomorrow morning would mark the beginning of the most expensive education Nola Varrow had ever received. The Riverside County Courthouse looked exactly the same as it had when I'd worked there 8 years ago. Same marble floors that echoed every footstep. Same security guards who treated everyone like potential threats. Same smell of industrial disinfectant mixed with nervous sweat. I signed in at the family court clerk's office, nodding to the familiar faces behind the counter. Martha Gonzalez had been processing divorce paperwork when I started as a clerk in 2008, and she was still there, gray-haired and sharp-eyed, reviewing documents with the precision of a Swiss watchmaker. "Holden Ravell," she said, looking up from her computer screen. "Heard you were doing well with that software company. What brings you back to our little corner of legal paradise?" "Filing a petition," I said, sliding my carefully prepared documents across the counter. "Marital Education Reimbursement under Statute 47B. Martha's eyebrows rose as she flipped through the pages. 47 pages of documentation. Someone did their homework. "Learned from the best," I replied, watching her review my filing fee check and supporting evidence. "Judge Hennessy's going to love this," she muttered, stamping each page with the official court seal. "She's been complaining that attorneys don't do proper case preparation anymore. This looks like something Judge Torrin would have approved back in the day." The comparison pleased me more than it should have. Judge Torrin had been a stickler for thorough documentation and legal precedent. If Martha thought he would have approved my petition, I'd done the work correctly. "When can I expect initial review?" I asked. "Standard timeline is 30 days, but given the asset preservation motion, Judge Hennessy will probably want to see this within the week." Martha handed me my file-stamped copies. "Your wife's attorney has 10 days to respond to the reimbursement claim and 5 days to respond to the asset freeze." I thanked Martha and headed back to my car, feeling lighter than I had in months. The legal machinery was now in motion, grinding forward with the inexorable momentum that had made family court both fascinating and terrifying during my clerk days. My phone rang as I pulled out of the courthouse parking lot. The caller ID showed my attorney's office. "Holden, it's David Chen. Just wanted to confirm that everything went smoothly with the filing." David Chen was a family law specialist I'd found through my old courthouse connections, a former prosecutor who'd switched to private practice after getting tired of criminal cases. His reputation for thorough preparation and aggressive advocacy had made him expensive, but worth every penny. "Filed and stamped," I confirmed. "Martha Gonzalez thinks Judge Hennessy will want to review it within the week." "Excellent. I've been researching the ethical implications of the Marrow situation. If your documentation is accurate, we're looking at potential state bar violations that could impact his license to practice." The thought of Brent Marrow facing professional consequences added a layer of satisfaction to my morning. I'd never met the man personally, but his role in my marriage's destruction had earned him a prominent place in my revenge calculations. "What's our timeline looking like?" "Assuming Nola's attorney files a standard response, we should have our first hearing within 30 days. Judge Hennessy likes to move these cases quickly, especially when there are asset preservation issues involved." After ending the call with David, I drove to my office, a small suite in a converted warehouse that housed my software development company. The irony of building a successful business while my marriage crumbled wasn't lost on me. Success had always been something Nola and I were supposed to achieve together, but somewhere along the way, her ambitions had diverged from our shared goals. My business partner, Rick Santos, looked up from his computer as I walked in. "How'd it go at the courthouse?" Rick was one of the few people who knew the full extent of my divorce strategy. As a fellow entrepreneur who'd survived his own messy separation, he understood the importance of protecting assets and documenting everything. "Filed and ready for battle," I said, settling into my desk chair. Now we wait for Nola's response. "Think she'll try to settle?" "Not initially. She's too proud, and her attorney probably thinks this is some kind of bluff." I pulled up my email, scanning for urgent business matters that needed attention. "But once they realize I have documentation for every claim, settlement negotiations will start looking more attractive." The morning passed quickly as I focused on work projects, trying to maintain some semblance of normal routine while my personal life exploded in slow motion. Around noon, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "This is Brent Marrow, we need to talk." I stared at the message for several minutes, considering my options. The smart play was to ignore it completely and let my attorney handle all communication. But curiosity got the better of me. "I don't think we have anything to discuss," I typed back. "Your legal action affects me professionally. I'd like to resolve this quietly." The audacity was breathtaking. The man who'd been sleeping with my wife wanted to resolve things quietly to protect his career, as if 23 years of marriage could be swept under the rug to preserve his professional reputation. "Should have thought about that before you started paying her rent," I replied. My phone immediately rang. Brent Marrow's number appeared on the screen, but I let it go to voicemail. Whatever he wanted to say could wait until I'd had time to think through the implications. The voicemail was brief, but revealing. "Holden, I understand you're upset, but dragging this through the courts helps nobody. Nola and I work together, nothing more. The apartment deposit was a professional courtesy, completely above board. Call me back so we can discuss this like adults." Professional courtesy. I almost laughed out loud. In my courthouse days, I'd seen dozens of professional courtesy arrangements that had landed attorneys in front of ethics committees. I forwarded the voicemail to David Chen with a brief note. "Brent Marrow is reaching out directly. Thought you should hear this." David called back within minutes. "Don't engage with him directly. This sounds like he's trying to build a defense for the ethics investigation before it officially starts." "What does that tell us?" "It tells us he's scared, and scared people make mistakes." The rest of the afternoon passed without incident, but I could feel the tension building like pressure in a steam engine. Somewhere across town, Nola was probably meeting with her attorney, trying to figure out how to respond to my petition. Brent was likely consulting with his own legal counsel, calculating the professional risks of his relationship with my wife. At 5 o'clock, I packed up my laptop and headed home to an empty house that no longer felt like a sanctuary. The kitchen still smelled faintly of Nola's perfume, and her coffee cup sat in the sink where she'd left it the night before. I poured myself a glass of wine and reviewed my copy of the filed petition one more time. 47 pages of documentation that represented 3 months of investigation, countless hours of legal research, and 23 years of accumulated resentment. Tomorrow, Nola would receive her official copy via process server. The day after that, her attorney would start reviewing the evidence and calculating response strategies. Within a week, the local legal community would be buzzing with gossip about the Ravell divorce and its implications for attorney ethics. But tonight, for the first time in months, I felt like I was back in control of my own story. The process server found Nola at her law firm on Thursday morning, delivering my petition in front of her colleagues during the weekly partners meeting. I knew this because Martha Gonzalez's daughter worked as a paralegal at Kellerman Dobbs and Associates, and courthouse gossip traveled faster than social media in our small legal community. By Thursday afternoon, my phone was ringing constantly. Nola called 6 times, leaving increasingly frantic voicemails. Brent Marrow called twice more, his professional courtesy tone replaced by barely controlled panic. Even Jamie called again, this time with his older brother Sid on a conference call. "Dad, what the hell is going on?" Sid's voice carried the same prosecutorial edge his mother had perfected. "Mom's saying you're trying to bankrupt her with some lawsuit." I was sitting in Bob's bar, nursing my second beer and watching the local news on the mounted television. The familiar smell of hops and old wood hung in the air, comforting in its predictability. Afternoon light slanted through the front windows, catching dust motes and the faint scratches in the bar top that told 100 quiet stories. The news anchor droned on about traffic and weather, her voice blending into the low hum of the room. The rusty anchor was nearly empty at 4 in the afternoon, just me, Bob, and a couple of regulars who treated the place like a second home. They sat at opposite ends of the bar, saying little, each absorbed in their own rituals, nodding occasionally at Bob as he wiped down glasses that were already clean. "It's not a lawsuit, it's a petition for reimbursement," I explained, keeping my voice level. "Your mother benefited from educational expenses I paid during our marriage. State law allows me to recover those costs in divorce proceedings." I watched my reflection in the darkened television screen as I spoke, noting how steady I sounded compared to how this conversation would have gone a year ago. $200,000, Dad? Jamie's voice cracked slightly. "That's insane." The word landed heavier than he intended, freighted with disbelief and something close to fear. That's what her education cost. Law school, bar prep, LSAT coaching, and that MBA program she completed last year. I have receipts for everything. I could see it all again as I listed it. Checks written, loans paid down, nights spent reassuring myself it was an investment in us. Sid jumped back in, his tone softening slightly. "Look, I get that you're hurt about the divorce, but this seems like overkill. Can't you guys work something out privately?" He'd always been the mediator, even as a kid, the one trying to keep peace when emotions ran hot. The question hit harder than I'd expected. Both of my sons were good men, hardworking, honest, and loyal to both parents, despite our obvious problems. They didn't deserve to be caught in the middle of this war. For a moment, the bar noise faded, replaced by memories of soccer games, late-night homework help, and the quiet pride of watching them become adults. "Your mother made her choices," I said finally. "Now she gets to live with the consequences." The words felt cold, but also necessary. After ending the call, I stared at my phone for several minutes, wondering if I was making the right decision. The financial reimbursement was legally justified, but the emotional cost to my family was mounting quickly. The screen reflected my face back at me, older than I remembered, lines etched deeper by stress and disappointment. Bob appeared with another beer, uninvited, but welcome. "Rough conversation?" He set the glass down gently, like he already knew the answer. "The boys are upset. They think I'm being vindictive." "Are you?" The question deserved an honest answer. "Probably, but I'm also being fair. She used our marriage as a stepping stone to build her career, then decided she didn't need me anymore. Why should she get to keep all the benefits without any of the costs?" Saying it out loud stripped it down to its core, free of justifications and legal language. Bob nodded thoughtfully. "Remember when you first started dating her? You were so proud when she got into law school. Talked about it for weeks." I was proud. Thought we were building something together. "Maybe you were, until she decided to build something with someone else." He said it gently, not accusing, just stating a truth neither of us could avoid. My phone buzzed with a text from David Chen. "Nola's attorney wants to schedule a meeting. They're taking this seriously." The vibration felt like a shift in momentum, subtle but unmistakable. I showed the message to Bob, who grinned appreciatively. "Sounds like your petition got their attention?" "David thinks they'll try to negotiate a settlement, avoid the public hearing and the ethics investigation." "What's your bottom line?" I'd been thinking about that question for days. The full reimbursement amount was legally justified, but settlements were about compromise, not justice. Somewhere between principle and pragmatism lay the line I was willing to hold. Full educational expenses plus interest. She keeps her consulting income, but the apartment arrangement with Brent gets disclosed to the state bar. That's still a lot of money. It's a lot of education. Friday morning brought the official response I'd been expecting. Nola's attorney, Margaret Walsh, had filed a motion to dismiss my petition, claiming that educational support was a normal marital expense that couldn't be recovered in divorce proceedings. The language was confident, almost dismissive, as if volume alone might substitute for substance. David Chen called me at the office to discuss the response. Walsh is using a shotgun approach, throwing every possible defense at the wall to see what sticks, but she's missing the key precedent cases that support our position. Is that good or bad for us? Good. It means she didn't do her homework, probably because Nola insisted on a quick response. Judge Hennessy is going to notice the lack of legal research. I could hear the satisfaction he was trying, and failing, to conceal. That afternoon, I received an unexpected visitor at my office. Margaret Walsh herself, looking every bit the seasoned family law attorney in her navy suit and pearl earrings. She carried herself with practiced authority, eyes already assessing the room as if it were a courtroom. Mr. Ravell, I'm Margaret Walsh, representing your wife in the divorce proceedings. I was hoping we could have a brief conversation about your reimbursement petition. I gestured to the chair across from my desk, curious about what approach she'd take. Walsh had a reputation as a skilled negotiator who preferred settlement conferences to courtroom battles. Her confidence suggested she expected this to be routine. I'll be direct, she said, settling into the chair. Your petition has merit, but the amount you're seeking is excessive. My client is willing to discuss a reasonable settlement that acknowledges your contributions to her education. What's reasonable? $50,000, paid over 3 years, plus she agrees to waive any claim to spousal support. I almost laughed. $50,000 doesn't even cover 1 year of law school tuition. Mr. Ravell, you supported your wife's education because you were married. That's what spouses do for each other. The fact that your marriage didn't work out doesn't entitle you to full reimbursement. Actually, State Statute 47B says it does. I'm sure you've reviewed the precedent cases I cited in my petition. Walsh's slight hesitation told me everything I needed to know. She hadn't reviewed the cases thoroughly, probably because she'd assumed my petition was an emotional reaction rather than a carefully researched legal strategy. For the first time, she was reacting instead of directing. The precedent cases involve different circumstances, she said. None of them deal with marriages of this length or educational expenses spread over multiple years. Henderson v. Henderson, 2019. 21-year marriage, educational expenses totaling $130,000. Court awarded full reimbursement plus interest. I leaned back in my chair, enjoying the moment. Morrison v. Morrison, 2020. 18-year marriage, law school, and MBA expenses. Full reimbursement ordered within 6 months of the final decree. Walsh's professional composure cracked slightly. Mr. Ravell, I have to ask, what's your background in family law? 5 years as a family court clerk under Judge Torrin. I learned a lot about marital asset recovery during that time. Understanding dawned in her eyes. She'd walked into a negotiation assuming she was dealing with an angry husband who'd hired an attorney to file nuisance paperwork. Instead, she was facing someone who understood the legal system as well as she did. The balance of power shifted, subtle but undeniable. I see. Well, that certainly changes the dynamic. Walsh gathered her purse and briefcase, preparing to leave. I'll need to discuss this new information with my client and revise our response accordingly. You should also discuss the ethical implications of the Brent Marrow situation, I said, as she reached the door. The state bar takes attorney relationships very seriously, especially when they involve financial arrangements. Walsh paused, her hand on the doorknob. Are you threatening to file an ethics complaint? I'm stating facts. Your client's relationship with a senior partner at her firm, combined with his financial support of her living arrangements, raises obvious ethical questions. Those questions become public record once we get to the discovery phase of my petition. After Walsh left, I called David Chen to update him on the conversation. 50,000? David laughed. That's insulting. She's clearly fishing, trying to see if you'll accept a nuisance value settlement. What's our next move? We wait for their amended response. Then we start discovery. Financial records, employment contracts, communication between Nola and Brent Marrow. Once we get into the details, settlement negotiations will become much more realistic. That evening, I drove to Jamie's apartment near the university. My younger son had called earlier, asking if we could talk privately about the divorce situation. I owed him an honest explanation, even if it meant revealing details about his mother that would be difficult to hear. Jamie's apartment was typical graduate student housing: functional furniture, textbooks everywhere, and a refrigerator stocked with leftover pizza and energy drinks. He offered me a beer, and we sat on his second-hand couch, both of us struggling to find the right words. Dad, I need to understand what's really happening here. Mom's version doesn't make sense, and your version sounds like something out of a legal thriller. What did your mother tell you? That you're having some kind of midlife crisis and trying to punish her for being successful. That the reimbursement thing is just spite disguised as legal action. I took a long sip of beer, considering how much truth Jamie could handle. Your mother had an affair with a senior partner at her law firm. When I confronted her about it, she handed me divorce papers and told me to disappear. The reimbursement petition is my way of ensuring that her freedom comes with appropriate costs. Jamie stared at me for several seconds, processing the information. An affair? Are you sure? I'm sure. The man paid the security deposit on her downtown apartment. They've been conducting their relationship right under everyone's nose, including mine. That's why you're going after the money? Because she cheated? I'm going after the money because it's legally mine. The affair just makes it easier to justify. We talked for another hour, covering the legal details, the timeline of discovery, and the likely outcomes of various settlement scenarios. Jamie listened without judgment, asking thoughtful questions that reminded me why I was proud to be his father. As I prepared to leave, Jamie walked me to the door. Dad, I don't condone what Mom did, but this is going to get ugly for everyone. Are you sure you want to put the family through a public legal battle? Your mother made it public when she served me divorce papers at work. I'm just making sure the public gets the whole story. The drive home gave me time to think about Jamie's question. Was I putting the family through unnecessary trauma for the sake of financial revenge? Or was I simply ensuring that 23 years of marriage ended with appropriate accountability? By the time I pulled into my driveway, I'd reached a conclusion that surprised me with its clarity. I wasn't the villain in this story. I was just the accountant, making sure all debts were properly calculated and paid. Judge Patricia Hennessy's courtroom hadn't changed much since my clerk days, except for a new coat of paint and updated technology. The same wooden benches, the same fluorescent lighting, the same sense of institutional gravity that made every proceeding feel momentous. I sat beside David Chen at the plaintiff's table, reviewing our discovery motions one final time before the hearing began. Across the aisle, Nola sat with Margaret Walsh, both women looking considerably less confident than they had during our initial negotiations. The past 2 weeks had been educational for everyone involved. Walsh had filed an amended response that actually addressed the legal precedents I'd cited, but her arguments were defensive rather than persuasive. More importantly, our discovery requests had started producing documents that painted a very clear picture of Nola's relationship with Brent Marrow. All rise, the bailiff announced as Judge Hennessy entered the courtroom. Judge Hennessy was everything Judge Torrin had been: thorough, impatient with unprepared attorneys, and focused on legal facts rather than emotional appeals. She'd reviewed our case file extensively, as evidenced by the stack of documents on her bench and the detailed questions she'd prepared. This is a petition for marital education reimbursement filed by Holden Ravell against Nola Varrow, she began, settling into her chair. I've reviewed the initial pleadings and the discovery motions. Ms. Walsh, your client's response claims that educational support is a normal marital expense that cannot be recovered. Do you have precedent to support that position? Walsh stood, consulting her notes. Your Honor, the length of this marriage and the integrated nature of the educational expenses make them indistinguishable from other marital investments. Mr. Ravell supported his wife's education as part of their joint life plan. Mr. Chen, your response? David stood smoothly, his preparation evident in every gesture. Your Honor, State Statute 47B specifically addresses educational reimbursement in divorce proceedings. The length of marriage is irrelevant if the supporting spouse can demonstrate direct financial contributions to the other party's professional advancement. We've documented every expense with bank records, tuition invoices, and loan documents. Judge Hennessy nodded, flipping through the case file. I've reviewed your documentation, Mr. Chen. It's thorough. Ms. Walsh, what's your client's position on the specific dollar amounts claimed? We dispute the MBA program expenses, Your Honor. Ms. Varrow represented those costs to her husband as $15,000, not $53,000. The difference was paid from her separate consulting income. This was the moment I'd been waiting for. David had prepared extensively for this exact argument, and our discovery had revealed information that would demolish Walsh's defense. Your Honor, David said, our discovery has revealed that Ms. Varrow's consulting income was funded by payments from Kellerman, Dobbs and Associates, specifically from senior partner Brent Marrow. We have bank records showing regular transfers from Mr. Marrow's personal account to Ms. Varrow's consulting account, totaling over $90,000 in the past 18 months. The courtroom fell silent. I could see Nola's face from my peripheral vision, pale, shocked, and suddenly very vulnerable. Judge Hennessy looked up from her documents. Ms. Walsh, were you aware of this financial arrangement? Walsh's hesitation was answer enough. Your Honor, we're still reviewing the discovery materials. Any financial arrangements between Ms. Varrow and her colleagues were professional in nature. Mr. Chen, do you have additional evidence regarding these financial arrangements? We do, Your Honor. Mr. Marrow paid the security deposit and first month's rent on Ms. Varrow's downtown apartment. He also funded her MBA program expenses through the consulting account arrangement. We have documentation showing that Ms. Varrow misrepresented these costs to her husband while conducting an extramarital relationship with Mr. Marrow. Judge Hennessy set down her pen and looked directly at Nola. Ms. Varrow, you're under oath. Did you misrepresent the cost of your MBA program to your husband? Nola stood slowly, her composure finally cracking. Your Honor, the financial arrangements were complicated. I was trying to minimize the burden on our joint finances. By having your lover pay for your education instead of your husband? The question hung in the air like a physical presence. I'd never seen Nola look so small, so defeated. For 23 years, she'd controlled every conversation, every negotiation, every conflict resolution. Now she was facing a judge who dealt with deceptive spouses every day and had no patience for carefully crafted explanations. Your Honor, I made mistakes in my personal life, but that doesn't invalidate my right to a fair divorce settlement. Judge Hennessy consulted her notes again. Ms. Walsh, what's your client's current annual income? Approximately $220,000 from her law firm salary, plus consulting income that varies by year. And Mr. Ravell's income? David answered. Approximately $180,000 from his software company, Your Honor. So Ms. Varrow now earns more than the husband who funded her education, and she earned that income using credentials he paid for while she was conducting an affair with the man who actually funded her advanced degree. Walsh tried to recover. Your Honor, the personal aspects of this case shouldn't overshadow the legal principles. The legal principles are clear, Ms. Walsh. State Statute 47B allows for educational reimbursement, when one spouse directly funds the other's professional advancement. Mr. Ravell has documented every expense with supporting evidence. The affair and financial deception actually strengthen his claim by demonstrating that Ms. Varrow was planning her exit strategy while still accepting his financial support. Judge Hennessy turned to David. Mr. Chen, what's your client's current settlement position? Full reimbursement of documented educational expenses, totaling $200,000, plus interest and legal fees. We're also requesting that the court refer the Marrow financial arrangements to the State Bar for ethical review. Ms. Walsh, what's your client's response? Walsh looked at Nola, who shook her head almost imperceptibly. Your Honor, we'd like to request a brief recess to discuss settlement options with our client. Granted, 15 minutes. During the recess, I stepped outside the courtroom with David to review our position. The hearing had gone better than expected. Judge Hennessy clearly understood the legal issues and wasn't sympathetic to Nola's attempts to minimize her deception. She's going to settle, David said confidently. Walsh knows they can't win on the merits, and the ethical investigation will destroy both Nola and Brent professionally. What kind of settlement are we looking at? Probably full reimbursement paid over 3 to 5 years, plus legal fees. The ethical referral might be negotiable if they agree to the financial terms. When we returned to the courtroom, Walsh requested a private conference with the judge. I watched Nola during the sidebar conversation, noting how she kept glancing at her phone, probably hoping for support from Brent, who was conspicuously absent from the proceedings. Judge Hennessy returned to the bench with a satisfied expression. The parties have reached a preliminary settlement agreement. Ms. Varrow will pay Mr. Ravell $200,000 in educational reimbursement, plus $15,000 in legal fees over a period of 5 years. The first payment of $50,000 is due within 60 days of the final divorce decree. I felt a surge of satisfaction that surprised me with its intensity. $215,000 paid over 5 years, plus the public acknowledgement that my claims had been legally justified. Additionally, Judge Hennessy continued, I'm ordering wage garnishment to ensure compliance with the payment schedule. Ms. Varrow's employer will deduct $2,400 per month from her salary until the obligation is satisfied. Wage garnishment. The ultimate humiliation for a successful attorney, having her employer deduct money from her paycheck like a deadbeat parent avoiding child support. Your Honor, Walsh interjected, we'd like to request that the garnishment be handled discreetly. Ms. Walsh, wage garnishment is a matter of public record. Your client's employer will be notified through standard legal channels. As we gathered our documents and prepared to leave, I caught Nola's eye for the first time during the proceedings. She looked at me with an expression I'd never seen before, complete defeat mixed with grudging respect. Outside the courthouse, David shook my hand with genuine enthusiasm. That was one of the most thorough reimbursement victories I've seen. Judge Hennessy was impressed with your documentation. What happens next? The divorce decree gets finalized, the garnishment order gets processed, and you start receiving monthly payments. Plus, the legal community now knows that educational reimbursement claims are viable when properly documented. As I drove home, I realized that the financial victory was only part of what I'd accomplished. More importantly, I'd proven that careful preparation and legal knowledge could level the playing field against opponents who assumed they held all the advantages. Nola had wanted a clean break, where she kept all the benefits, and I disappeared quietly. Instead, she got a very expensive lesson in contract law and marital equity. The monthly payments would continue for 5 years, a constant reminder that actions have consequences, and that education, even legal education, sometimes comes with unexpected costs. 3 months after the court hearing, I was reviewing quarterly financial reports in my office when Rick Santos knocked on my door with an unusual expression, part amusement, part concern. You need to see this, he said, holding up his phone. It's all over social media. The screen showed a local news website with the headline, Prominent attorney faces wage garnishment in divorce settlement. Below it was a photo of Nola leaving the courthouse, looking haggard and defensive. I scanned the article quickly. A court reporter had picked up the story from public records, focusing on the unusual nature of educational reimbursement and the wage garnishment order. The piece mentioned Brent Marrow by name, describing him as a senior partner whose financial arrangements with the defendant are under review by the State Bar Association. "This is going to make waves in the legal community," Rick observed. He was right. Within hours, my phone was buzzing with calls from former courthouse colleagues, old friends, and even a few reporters looking for additional details. The story had touched a nerve. Apparently, I wasn't the only person who'd funded a spouse's education only to watch them leave for someone else. Bob called around lunchtime, his voice carrying the satisfaction of a man who'd watched his friend win a long-fought battle. "Saw the news story. How does it feel to be famous?" "Weird, mostly. I never expected this to go public." "Are you kidding? This is the kind of story people love. The little guy using the system to get justice. You're like a folk hero for divorced husbands." That afternoon, I received an unexpected call from Judge Hennessy's clerk. The judge wanted to see me in chambers, not about my case, which was closed, but about a different matter entirely. I arrived at the courthouse an hour later, curious about what Judge Hennessy wanted to discuss. Her chambers were exactly as I remembered from my clerk days: law books, case files, and a coffee maker that had seen better decades. "Holden, thank you for coming. I wanted to discuss your case, but not for legal reasons." Judge Hennessy gestured to a chair across from her desk. "I've been getting calls from other judges about your reimbursement petition. Apparently, it's inspired several similar filings across the state. Is that a problem?" "On the contrary, it's exactly what the statute was designed to accomplish. Too many attorneys have been advising clients that educational reimbursement isn't viable in long-term marriages. Your case proves otherwise." She pulled out a thick file folder. "I've had 3 similar petitions filed in the past month, all citing your case as precedent. The documentation standards you set are becoming the benchmark for other attorneys." The conversation continued for 20 minutes, covering legal precedent, documentation requirements, and the broader implications of educational reimbursement in divorce proceedings. As I prepared to leave, Judge Hennessy made an unexpected observation. "You know, Holden, you could have a future in family law if you ever get tired of software development. Your understanding of the legal system is better than most attorneys who appear in my courtroom." Driving home, I considered her suggestion. The idea of returning to legal work had never occurred to me, but the past few months had reminded me how much I enjoyed legal research and case preparation. My phone rang as I pulled into my driveway. The caller ID showed Nola's number, our first direct conversation since the court hearing. "Holden, we need to talk." Her voice carried none of the confidence I'd grown accustomed to over 23 years of marriage. She sounded tired, defeated, and older than her 45 years. "I'm listening." "This media attention is destroying my career. Partners at the firm are distancing themselves from me. Clients are requesting different attorneys, and the state bar investigation is moving forward. You got what you wanted. Can you please make it stop?" The request was absurd on multiple levels. I had no control over media coverage or state bar investigations, and her assumption that I was somehow orchestrating her professional destruction revealed how little she understood about consequences. "Nola, I filed a legal petition for educational reimbursement. Everything else is just the natural result of your choices." "My choices? You're the one who made this public by filing that petition." "You made it public when you had an affair with your boss and lied about your MBA expenses. I just documented the facts." The conversation continued for several minutes, with Nola alternating between anger and pleading. She wanted me to contact reporters and ask them to stop covering the story. She wanted me to withdraw the state bar complaint that I'd never actually filed. Most unrealistically, she wanted me to somehow repair the professional reputation she'd destroyed through her own actions. "The garnishment is humiliating," she said finally. Every month my employer has to deduct money from my paycheck and send it to you. My colleagues know exactly what's happening. Good. Maybe other people will think twice before using their marriages as stepping stones to affairs. After ending the call, I poured myself a glass of wine and sat on my back deck, watching the sunset over the river. The past 6 months had transformed my life in ways I'd never anticipated. The quiet software engineer who'd signed divorce papers without argument had become something else entirely, someone who fought back, who documented everything, and who understood that justice sometimes required patience and preparation. My phone buzzed with a text from Jamie. "Dad, saw the news story. Are you okay with all this attention?" I typed back, "I'm fine. How are you handling it?" "Proud of you, actually. Mom made her choices. You just made sure they came with appropriate costs." The response surprised me. Both of my sons had initially been upset about the divorce proceedings, viewing my reimbursement petition as vindictive overreach. But as the details emerged, the affair, the financial deception, the lies about educational expenses, they'd begun to understand that their father wasn't the villain in this story. That evening I received an email from an unexpected source. Margaret Walsh, Nola's attorney. "Mr. Ravell, I wanted to reach out personally to acknowledge the quality of your legal work on the reimbursement petition. Your documentation and case research were exemplary. If you ever consider returning to legal practice, I'd be happy to provide a reference." The email was professional courtesy, but it also represented something more significant: acknowledgement from the opposing attorney that I'd outmaneuvered them through superior preparation rather than luck or vindictiveness. I drafted a brief response. "Thank you for the professional courtesy. The case was about accountability, not revenge. I hope your client learns from the experience." As I prepared for bed, I reflected on the journey that had brought me to this point. 6 months ago, I'd been a betrayed husband signing divorce papers in my kitchen, watching 23 years of marriage dissolve into legal paperwork. Tonight, I was someone who'd fought back successfully, who'd used the legal system to ensure that actions had consequences, and who'd proven that careful preparation could overcome seemingly impossible odds. The monthly payments would continue for another 4 years and 9 months. A constant reminder to Nola that her freedom had come with exactly the costs I'd calculated. More importantly, the case had established legal precedent that would help other betrayed spouses recover their educational investments. I'd started this process as a victim. I was ending it as someone who understood that justice wasn't about revenge. It was about making sure that all debts, financial and otherwise, were properly accounted for and paid in full. The education was complete, the tuition had been expensive, and the final grade was exactly what both of us had earned.